Sonnet time. Sonnet time. Okay. Let me actually pull up a whiteboard here. So sonnets. So one of the assignments that you guys will have in this class will be, I'll just pull Word up. This Zoom whiteboard isn't worth a darn. One of the assignments you guys will have in this class will be doing a sonnet. Okay, you will actually write a 14-line sonnet. It doesn't have to be a great sonnet, right? All I'm asking for is to make sure that it's correct. Right? Whenever we talk about sonnets, there's rules to sonnets as far as like how they rhyme, what their meter is, and all that good stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about them here. Sonnets started with the writer Petrarch. Petrarch is who started the sonnet form. He said Petrarch is an Italian Renaissance writer. So he was writing roughly around the same time as was Dante. So thereabouts, he was writing the same time as Dante. So sonnet is a word meaning the meaning of the word is love poem, right? These are, for the most part, love poems, right? That's what sonnets are. So for all you ladies in here, if you haven't had anybody write you a sonnet yet, your guy's doing something wrong, right? So for all the guys in here, I'm about ready to show you how to do some romancing. Okay, so pay attention from the master. Okay, so pay attention. All right, but Petrarch's sonnets are mostly about, like if we talk about the themes and the ideas, like what are his sonnets about? They're mostly about his love of this woman named Laura, right? His love of this woman named Laura. Laura was a married woman. Like Laura was married to somebody else. Petrarch kind of pined over her, right? She was his true love, even if he couldn't have her. Right. That's kind of the basic idea of most of his poems, right? He had a crush that he could never follow up with, right? That was never going to go anywhere. So that's the basic idea of his poems. Okay. We take a look at this PDF I gave you of his poems. I'll read you guys my favorite one. So this was what I gave you, this PDF rather than have you read it out of the book, because this will show you how it's rhymed in the original Italian and stuff. You really can't. I know you guys can't read Italian, right? But you can kind of see, once I go over how they're rhymed, you will be able to kind of see the rhymes like sole, dole, avesa, ageza, right? See, you'll be able to see how these things are rhymed. But we'll worry about that in a minute. But just as you see here, we kind of get a prose translation of Petrarch, because translating it over into where it looks like poetry from the Italian, you lose a lot of meaning and stuff. So they translate it like it's prose rather than a poem. So just the basic idea of this one, 141, you can kind of see how this works. So a sonnet will usually start with a big comparison. So Timmy, mute for me if you don't mind. But the sonnet will start with a big comparison. So in this one, he's comparing himself to a butterfly, right? So he says, as sometimes in the summertime, the simple butterfly seeking the light when its desire fly into someone's eyes, whereby it dies and the other is pained. So always I run to my fated sun, her eyes whence such sweetness comes to me, for love cares nothing for the reign of reason, and discernment is vanquished by desire. I see well how much they shun me, and I know truly that I shall die of it, for my strength cannot hold out against the suffering. But so sweetly does love dazzle me that I bewail another's pain and not my own harm, and my soul blind consents to her own death. All right, so keeping the context in mind that he's talking about this woman he can't have, Laura, right? He's saying, he's kind of justifying himself here. He's like, here's why I can't help it. So just like how a butterfly can't help but fly to the light, so I too can't help but fly to the light here, right? Even though flying to the light will cause the butterfly to die most of the time, right? It's kind of like how a gnat will, like you guys know, in the summer you'll plug up your bug zappers, right? Just like how the gnat can't help but go to the bug zapper, right? So I too can't help but go to my love here, right? Whether it's going to hurt me or not. So that's what he's doing here, right? He's setting up this elaborate comparison to express this idea. So yeah, whenever I go over this collection, I always go over that one. That one's my favorite of the lot. This 190 is also one that I go over a lot too. That's the one that Wyatt did a translation of in English. A white doe in the green grass appeared to me with two golden horns between two rivers in the shade of a laurel, and the sun was rising in the unripe season. Her look was so sweet and proud that to follow her, I left every task, like the miser who, as he seeks treasure, sweetens his trouble with delight. Let no one touch me, she bore written with diamonds and topazes around her lovely neck. It has pleased my Caesar to make me free. And the sun had already turned at midday, and my eyes were tired by looking, but not sated, when I fell into the water and she disappeared. Right. So in this one, right, Laura is kind of like Laura's the doe, right, in the in this poem. I'll show you the Wyatt version in a minute. The Wyatt version puts a twist on it. But this is
These
Petrarch.
poems confused me because of the rhyming and where they're translated. Like now, I didn't know what this was over here on the other side until you said that was. I figured it was the poem, but now I didn't notice that the end of it that rhymed and it was lost in translation. But I had a hard time. I guess it confused me, not a hard time, but it just confused me.
Yeah, I mean this is the original Italian, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like you can kind of see how the lines rhyme, even though you don't know the words.
Yeah.
You can see how they rhyme, like l'erba, acerba,
Yeah,
like doro, aloro. Right? You can kind of hear that rhyme if you just look at the end of the words here. Superba, decerba, lavoro, tesoro. The first 8 lines of a Petrarchan sonnet have the same rhyme. You have A, B, B, A, B, B, A. So you kind of put a variable over that particular sound. So the erba, the serba, that erba sound, that's what we put the A. Or the oro sound we put as B. Right. So that's kind of how the rhyme works. So I will type out the exact way these things rhyme for you. So the way that So there's two types of sonnets that you can write. The one from Petrarch, that one's a bit harder to do. That one's a bit harder to do. But this is called the Petrarchan sonnet. Petrarchan sonnet. So a Petrarchan sonnet is rhymed as follows. So it's rhymed A, B, B, A, B, B, A, C, D. So this is when a Petrarchan one gets a little complicated. C, D, E, C, D, E. So what these variables mean is each variable was a sound, right? Each variable is its own sound. So in a Petrarchan sonnet, in the first 8 lines, you only have 2 sounds that you have to rhyme over and over. The middle lines each time are the B sound. The first line and the fourth line are the A sound. So the first 8 lines of a sonnet is called the octave. The octave. I'll just say here, first 8 lines is called the octave. The octave of the sonnet always sets up the idea, right? So this is where you're setting up the comparison. So just like how a butterfly flies into the light, right? So that the octave is usually you're setting up the problem. The final 6 lines of the sonnet is called the sestet. The sestet. The sestet is the resolution to the problem you kind of set up. And the sestet in a Petrarchan sonnet's a little complicated. You have the first line and the fourth line, it's a C sound. The second line and the fifth line is a D sound. The third line and the sixth line is an E sound. So you start to get a lot more sounds at the end of your lines in a Petrarchan sonnet. Okay, so the way that they rhyme is a little hard compared to the Shakespeare version.
So like A, B, B, A, like A, you got the A sound at the end.
Mm-hmm. So
what B would be the B sound.
Right. So whatever the sound is, right? So let me.
So it don't have to end with an A. It can be any sound.
Think about it like it's math, right? In math, you put variables over to express.
Oh, okay, so that's just how I don't know how to say it, but I think I got it now. I think so. It can be any sound, but that's just what you're showing us to do.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It's like variables in math, right? You give it the variable A to stand for whatever that sound is.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I watched your video on Blackboard, and it had I was like, does everything have to end in an A or an E? Yeah. Okay.
No.
Okay.
You'll let me pull up the white poem to illustrate.
And then it's supposed to rhyme, and then Petrarchan didn't, and it threw me off. Shakespeare's better about rhyming.
So this is the poem from Sir Thomas Wyatt. So Sir Thomas Wyatt was an English poet who translated over a lot of these poems to English for an English audience. So the same poem that I just read you about the deer, this is his version of it. But you can kind of see how the rhyming works if we look, right? So if we put the and sound, we give that the letter A, right? So hind, behind, mind. This is spelled wind, but you would pronounce it wind, right? So that ein sound is your A sound. The or sound is your B sound. So more, sore, afore, therefore. All right, that or sound is your B. Doubt, about, that out sound, that's your C sound. Vain, plain, tame. Right, that's the D sound, right? So you can't, if you put a variable on them, like that goes in that order that I just prescribed to you, right? A B B A B B A. Just to give you guys a little bit of context for this poem, the Whoso Lists the Hunt. Well, I'll just read it for you. Whoso lists the hunts, I know where is a hind, but as for me, alas, I may no more. The vain travail hath wearied me so sore, I am of them that furthest cometh behind. It may I by no means my wearied mind draw from the deer, but as she fleeth afore, fainting I follow. I leave off therefore, since in a net I seek to hold the wind. Who list her hunt, I put him out of doubt, as well as I may spend his time in vain. Engraven with diamonds in letters plain, there is written her fair neck round about. Noli me tangere, for Caesar's I am, and wild for to hold, though I seem tame. So let me unpack this one for you. So Sir Thomas Wyatt was writing these poems. He was in the court of a really famous English king, King Henry VIII. Right. Everybody knows how King Henry VIII was. Right. He was very angry. He was very violent. He had his wives killed because they wouldn't have sons for him. Right. King Henry VIII is why the English broke off from the Catholic Church, because when the church told King Henry VIII he couldn't get a divorce, he said, well, hell, I'll just form my own church. Right. Well, the story of this is Wyatt was actually in love with one of King Henry VIII's queens. He was in love with one of King Henry VIII's queens. So, if knowing that, when he's taking this idea from Petrarch, the ending of it seems a little more sinister, right? Touch me not, for Caesar's I am, and wild for to hold, though I seem tame. So, that's a warning at the end of this one, right? I belong to Caesar. I'm wild. Don't touch me, right? Dire consequences may follow. Right? So, again, it takes that idea of inaccessible love, but it's got a spin here, right? If you do try to go through this relationship, it's probably not a good idea. So
does this have to be about love, or can we just make it about any single idea, as long as we stick to that idea?
it can be about anything. As long as you follow the structure whenever you write your own.
Okay.
As long as you follow the structure. So that's the Petrarchan sonnet. Let me show you guys the English sonnet. The English sonnet's a little bit easier. When it comes to the English sonnets, there's two very famous ones. First, let me show you the rhyme scheme first. So the English sonnet is rhymed as follows. It's rhymed as follows. It's pretty much every other line has a sound. A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. So every other line has a different sound besides the final two, which are rhymed back to back. Let me make this smaller so we can see the whole thing. A, B, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. We look at Sonnet 18, which is one of Shakespeare's most famous sonnets. This is Shakespeare's probably his most famous sonnet. This is, shall I compare thee to a summer day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines the time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Right, this is really cool, right? Because he's saying your beauty will never die, right? Your beauty will never die as long as people read this poem, right? People will always know your beauty, right? Based off of this poem. Well, we're reading it 500 years later, right? So he was kind of right, which is kind of the funny thing here, right? You know, you'll always be remembered like it was a summer's day, right? But you can kind of see how it's rhymed. Day, May, temperate, date, shines, declines, dimmed, untrimmed, fade, shade, owest, growest. Then the final two lines, see thee. So every other line is rhymed in a Shakespeare sonnet. So it's a little bit easier than the other one. Day, May, temperate, date, shines, declines, dim and trend, fade, shade, owest, growest, see thee. So whenever you will write your own, that's how you would have to sort of put it in that rhyme scheme, right? I haven't even gone over meter yet. I've only gone over rhyme so far. Meter is a whole other thing. But you can kind of see how that rhymes. What do you guys think of this poem? This is his most famous one. You guys think this is as cool of a poem as I do? I think it's a cool idea that he has here.
I have like a little miniature book full of all of Shakespeare's sonnets, and this is one of my favorite ones.
That's one of your favorites.
Yeah, there's a bunch in here though. Like I think it doesn't have all of them, but it has about 143, 144 in it.
Yeah, he did like over 100 some. I'm not sure the exact number.
Yeah, it's like 154. I'm looking at it.
Yeah. In 18, he's kind of painting his love like Petrarch did, right? She's shining, right? She's like a summer day. She's bright and luxurious, right? He's painting. This is his riff on a Petrarchan sonnet, Sonnet 18. My favorite one is 130. My favorite one's 130. We'll see what you ladies think of this one. This is my favorite. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go, my mistress when she treads on the ground. And yet by heaven, I think my love is rare, as any she belied with false compared. Right. So in this one, he's saying, right, you know, she's not perfect. Right? She's not perfect like she was like in Sonnet 18. Right? She's not perfect. She's got flaws. Right. She's got black wiry hair. Right. She's got her cheeks aren't red and blush. Right. Her
When he says her breasts are done, he means like they're brown, right?
right.
So could he be speaking about a lady of like another race besides like white, like, you know, a black woman, or like maybe like a Middle Eastern woman or something?
Yeah, you're exactly right. But lots of these later sonnets in his collection, they're called the Dark Lady sonnets. Like, and they're supposedly about like a woman who's not Anglo-Saxon, right? So whether you want to say that she's dark metaphorically or dark literally because of her skin tone or whatever, right? Those poems are often called the Dark Lady sonnets. But yeah, I've always liked this one, right? This you're not perfect, right? But I wouldn't trade you for anything else. Right? I think that's a pretty cool idea. It's almost insulting. Like it's ladies, if your husbands or your boyfriends, if they gave you this one, right? Would you be insulted, or would you think it's romantic, or what? How would you react to this?
I wouldn't be mad about it. I mean, at least they're honest about how they like perceive you. And you know, like they you know, you could acknowledge that your significant other has flaws, but as long as you're still willing to accept those flaws, and then that's all that matters.
I would definitely tell my husband, use different words. I don't like those words. That's something else.
This reminds me of something that my honey would have said. So God love his heart. But that's what, to me, true love is honest like that. Like if you can't, if you can't be honest like this, that's just puppy love. That's not, like, you're not there yet.
Right. Now you're not always going to be in your 20s, right, or in your teens and perfect and in the best shape, right?
Yeah, it's not like in the movies when you wake up and your hair and your makeup's perfect, whatever. Like you're going to hear, honey, go brush your teeth. Like
right. I agree with you there. That's why I like this one more than even 18. Right. 18, she's perfect. Right. But you can kind of imagine she's probably got like blonde hair and blue eyes, right? She's that perfect. Right. But in this one, right, she's more realistic. So again, though, you can kind of see the rhyme, how the rhyme works. Sun, dun, red, head, white, light, cheeks, reeks. No, go, sound, ground, rare, compare. Right. So you can kind of see that ends in that every other line, but the last two, every other line rhymes up to the last two, which are rhymed back to back. So it doesn't matter what, if you pick a Shakespeare or a Petrarchan one, they're always 14 lines. They're always 14 lines. So let me now talk about meter. It's a lot easier to understand rhyme than meter. If I have a flaw when I teach poetry, it's teaching meter, right? So let me try to explain it. We'll come back to the poem in a second to break down the meter. So meter is the beat. Meter is the rhythm. Let's share my screen again. Meter is the rhythm of a line. It's the beat. Right? Some people have a better ear for rhythm than others, but meter is rhythm. And English sonnets are rhymed, and what the meter is called iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter. Whenever you guys write your own lines, I'm going to mostly expect you to write in this, the iambic pentameter. Might give you a little bit of room to breathe, but for the most part, your lines need to be in iambic pentameter. So if a line is in iambic pentameter, it has 10 syllables in the line. There's 10 syllables. So you have a syllable in it. In your line, you can only have 10 syllables. So you kind of have to count them out. But in iambic pentameter, within a line, you have what's called a foot. Right? You have what's called a foot. So the different types of feet in a line, one is called an iamb. And this is what iambic pentameter is based off of. So an iamb kind of follows this pattern. It's an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. So if we were doing this in rhythm, it would be a the thumb, the thumb, right? The thumb, the thumb. That's kind of what an iamb sounds like. The thumb, the thumb. Right? An unstressed syllable, you're not putting the stress on it, followed by a stressed syllable. Right? So, and in what iambic pentameter means, there's 5 of those. So with iambic pentameter, a line kind of looks, a perfect line of iambic pentameter will look like this. The pent means 5, right? So there's 5 feet. So there's 10 syllables in the line, but they follow this basic pattern: the thumb, the thumb, the thumb, the thumb, the thumb. Right? It has that kind of sing-songy rhythm to it. The thumb, the thumb. Right? That's called an iamb. In an iambic pentameter, you have 5 of those lines. But if you're talking about poetry, there's also other kinds of feet besides iambs. There's also what's called a trochee. A trochee is where you have a stressed syllable followed by an unstressed syllable. So it's the opposite of an iamb. So let's say the famous William Blake poem, Tiger, the Tiger. The first line is tiger. He spells it this way: tiger, tiger, burning bright. Right? If you kind of put the syllables here, you kind of, tiger's 2 syllables, right? Tiger. So you kind of note it when by stressed, you put the emphasis whenever you say the word on the stressed syllable. So in his line, he would say tiger, tiger, burning bright. So I'm enunciating slowly there, so you can kind of hear it, right? Tiger, tiger, burning bright. Burning, right? The ing isn't stressed. Tiger, tiger, burning bright. So that's what a trochee is. That's the opposite of an iamb. Then an anapest is there's several of these. I'm not going to go over them all. But an anapest, there's 3 syllables on the foot. So the anapest is kind of dum, dum, dum. That's kind of what an anapest sounds like. Oftentimes anapests are in a line of poetry, usually it's much like a prepositional phrase, right? For the king, right? For the king, right? The for and the, you wouldn't put stress on it. You would put stress on the noun, right? For the king, for the king. That's what an anapest is, dum. It's just an extra unstressed word. That's what, an extra unstressed syllable. That's what separates it from being like an iamb. So if you're writing a line of iambic pentameter, most of the feet in the line should be iambs. Like, you're never going to be expected to have every foot in your line be an iamb, but most of them should be. The line, so of the 5 feet in the line, most of them should be iambs. There's room for a trochee here and there. There's room for an anapest. I always tell students to avoid anapests if you can, to keep the rhythm going. Anapests will kind of like knock your rhythm out. So this is kind of how this works. So let me copy and paste this sonnet. And I'll kind of break down the rhythm with you. So line 3 is a perfect example of line 3 and 4 are perfect iambic lines. So we'll highlight the stressed syllables. If snow be white, why then her breasts are done. Right? If snow be white, why then her breasts are done. All those lines in that, all the words in that line are only one syllable. Right, so you can kind of see how that works. If snow be white, why then her breasts are done. So there's not a word in that line that's more than one syllable. So you can kind of see how that's an iamb, a perfect iambic line, right? If snow be white, why then her breasts are done. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head, right? So that's kind of that's a perfect line too. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. But no such roses see I. This line's not perfect, in her cheeks. So this line has an anapest at the end, in her cheeks. So basically you count out your syllables. Make sure that you have 10 syllables in the line. And make sure that it follows this basic rhythm. The dum, the dum, the dum, the dum, the dum. You follow that basic rhythm in your lines. So not only do you have to account for the rhyme at the end, but you also kind of have to follow that basic rhythm. So if you guys kind of got like a musical ear, you kind of get it. Listening to rap music is a good way to kind of train for rhythm, right? Because that hip hop's all about rhythm. If you got a good ear for rhythm, you can kind of hear how that works. So the key almost is to keep, you want to keep your vocabulary kind of simple. Right? If you pick words that are like 3 or 4 syllables long, right? It's hard to then condense your lines to 10 syllables. So you have to be careful. You have to be economical with your words. You can't have a lot of words with big syllables because in order to keep your rhythm, right? Sometimes that's hard to do with words that are 3 or 4 syllables long. So most of the time you want to keep your words kind of simple. That was very long-winded. I'm sure that some of you guys are the other day saying, what the hell did he was talking about? Okay. So are you guys in that boat? Or do you kind of understand where I'm going talking about meter?
So are you gonna post this onto Blackboard as well, this example?
Of course.
Okay, that will help me a lot.
Yeah, I already have a video up that I recorded before where I do this same talk too. But yeah, I'll post their one for tonight up, of course. How are you guys doing with this? Do you understand where I'm going talking about meter?
Yeah,
Sir.
I understand. Like it'll take me a minute to get the hang of it, but I think I understand it pretty well.
This is gonna be worse than a paper.
Only 14 lines. That's all it is.
Yeah, I have no rhythm. Like, yeah, so I think I know where you're going. I hope 10 syllables in a line, right?
Right.
Well, I was counting the but no such roses see I in her cheeks. I think that's got more. So like
How many?
I have 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, it's got 10. Okay. But keep the words simple. Rhyme at the end. 10 syllables. And what else? Oh, and that stress the word. So on those stressed words, is it usually like a noun that's stressed?
Yeah, that's a good question. So normally like if it's a 1 syllable noun, that word is always stressed. If it's a 1 syllable noun, that word's always stressed. So like rose or cheek, right? Those are 1 syllable nouns. So those are always stressed. That's a rule.
So do you have a preference on like how we do the syllables, whether it be the anapest or something else?
So say that question again.
Do you have a preference on how we do the syllables, like the way you were telling us with the trochee and the anapest? Is there a specific way, like do we need to do one or the other, or can we do a mixture, or?
Okay, so long as most of the lines most of the words in the line, if it mostly follows an IM, right? That's usually the best practice. But I do leave you room to mix it up too. So let's say you want to throw an anapest in your line, or let's say you want to throw in a trochee, right? You do have some room to play with there. But as long as your line, as long as the majority of the feet are iambic, it's fine. You're never going to have to get a perfect line of iambic pentameter like these 2 lines. It's hard to do, right? So you do have some room to play with.
Is feet the lines?
A foot in this case is the meter, right? So if snow, that's a foot. That's a
Dumb.
Mhm.
Okay. The foot. All right.
And there's 5 feet in a line. And it should come out to 10. So if you throw an anapest in, right, you can kind of see how that might throw you off a little bit because the anapest is 3. It's 3. If I count 11 syllables in your line, I'm not going to bust your chops for it. Right? I'm not going to be that picky. But if your line goes 14 syllables, I will be picky, right? So I will give you a little room for error. But if it's 14 syllables, that's definitely not a sonnet, right? So I'll give you a little bit of room to not be perfect.
And it only has to be 14 lines, right?
Right. A sonnet's always 14 lines. So the basic idea of even having you guys write one, it's pretty much just to give you guys an appreciation as far as how hard the things are to write. Right. You can kind of get an appreciation if you can successfully pull it off. It gives you kind of a better appreciation of the artistry that went behind even making some of the classic ones, like 18 or 130. Right. So that's the basic guide. This is the only time I ever do like creative writing type assignments in my class. Just to kind of give you guys an appreciation of how hard they are to do. So it can be about anything. It can be about any subject. It doesn't have to be about love. It can be about any subject you want. Let me look back at the module here. I have some student examples people have done. This one's called, this is one that a student did for me before. This is called Whoso Lists to Drink. Okay, it's about going bar hopping. Whoso lists to drink, I know where is a keg, but as for me, old fuck, I will no more. I started too soon to get up from this floor. Awake, he yells, the beer is green, move a leg. So you can kind of see keg, leg, more, floor. He's doing the Petrarchan style here, right? So you can kind of go any kind of content you want as far as that goes. So I will post some examples of some good ones that students have done for me before, so you can kind of see, get some ideas, maybe some inspiration there. So I'm not going to be assigning this for a little while yet. Probably close to Thanksgiving break. That'll probably be when I'll actually ask for them. But today's kind of the tutorial as far as that's the rules. If you can write a poem that follows those rules, you'll be in good shape. I'll probably post the prompts up, but it won't be due for a while yet. Right, so you'll do the short paper too before you do this. But I think it's worth 10% of the grade. So so long as you mostly get it right. That's pretty much what I'll look for. Most of the time people do well with them. I've assigned this in several classes. Usually people get pretty close. I usually get A's or B's on them, depending on how close you get. You have to be kind of real far out there to get a C or worse on them. I've had people submit stuff to me like 20 lines long. I'm like, well, that's clearly not a sonnet, right? Because it breaks the rule of 14 lines, right? So F, right? But you kind of have to be real out there to do badly on this. How are you guys doing? Sherry, I haven't heard anything from you today. How are you feeling about all this?
Worried. This seems very confusing to me, but I'll work at it until I get it.
Right. Yeah, you guys will find whenever you write them, you'll probably write several drafts before you get it right. I know when I've written them before, it took me several drafts to get it to make it feel perfect.
I'm not excited about rhyming them. I hate making stuff rhyme.
Right. Well, that's the main difference between old style British poetry versus American poetry. Because in the old style British poems, like Shakespeare, right, they do rhyme. Right, American poetry, when American poetry became a thing, they were like, screw the Brits. We don't need to rhyme anymore. We're Americans. We don't need to follow these old rules. Right. So a lot of like modern American poetry doesn't rhyme. Right? Because they say, why should we follow these old rules? Right. We're Americans. We don't listen to anybody else. Right. So Robert Frost. So poetry that doesn't rhyme that follows iambic pentameter. That's called blank verse. Right. Poetry that doesn't rhyme, but it still has the rhythm. That's blank verse. Robert Frost famously said that blank verse is like playing tennis with the net down, right? It's like playing tennis with the net down, right? It's easy. It's easy to write, right? Because you don't have to worry about the rhyme. So I always thought that was a pretty snide, funny remark, right? That it's harder to make it rhyme than in poetry that you don't have to.
I just think rhyming poems makes them sound like so positive and cheerful, even if it's something really dark. And like, I don't know, I'm just, I'm excited to try to write it, but I'm not excited about trying to rhyme them.
Right. I guess
I like whenever, I think rhyming make it, I think it would make it easier for me. And I don't know, I think it makes it sound a lot more creative, and it's more intriguing to me.
Right. I think I feel the same way as you, Timmy. Even though I'm an American lit scholar, I like the older style poems that rhyme and stuff better. Kind of like you in that regard.
I felt horrible about it there at first, but once I realized it wouldn't do like next Thursday, I feel great now.
Right. Lauren, how do you feel about all this?
I'm kind of still confused about what I have to do, but I have a couple of weeks to think about it, so I should be okay until then.
Right. Desmond, this is the first time you've joined us for Zoom. How are you doing over there?
I think I understand what you're saying.
Good. Shanika, how about you?
I'm trying to sit and think like what to write about. Just I've thought about maybe writing about a dog, outside kids. I have no idea even where to start.
Right. You can literally do anything you want. Sometimes saying you can do anything you want is kind of restrictive in a way, right? Giving you too much freedom, you're like, oh darn, what do I do? Jenna, I haven't heard from you either. How are you doing? How do you think about all this? Maybe Jenna got up to go do something else real quick. I'll come back to her. Emily, you feeling good?
I feel pretty good about it. Just the syllable thing kind of trips me up a little, but I think I'll be okay.
Yeah, like I said, so long as you mostly get the lines, iambic, that's all I ask. What about you, Demi? See that you're here today. How are you feeling about all this? You can always type a message out if you don't want to talk. Niles, what about you? How are you doing?
I feel pretty good about it. So she said our sonnet is due next Thursday, correct?
No, it's going to be due a ways off.
Oh,
I just went over it today, but it'll be a while before it's due.
okay. So when's our next assignment that's due?
Short paper 2 is due on the 5th of November. So that's the next big assignment that's due, besides the discussions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and you said who done the first paper? We could skip this one or do this one and skip the next one?
That's right.
Okay.
So I'm going to assign 3, but you only have to do 2 of them.
Now, like, if you ended up doing all 3, did you get extra credit or no?
Well, in that case, I would grade the best 2 of the 3. That's
Got
how I
you.
would.
Okay. I got you. Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, so yeah, I'll get the prompt up. I'll think of a due date. Maybe like the 12th of November, maybe around there. That'll probably be when I'll ask for this. So I'll give you guys plenty of time. Demi said she's nervous about ionic pentameter. Right. So like I said, so long as most of the words have that rhythm, you're good. I'll of course be willing to go over drafts with you before this is due. So if you write it early, you can send me a draft. I'll be like, okay, maybe you need to work on your lines a little bit. Maybe you need to cut some of that down. Okay, so if you do send me a draft early, and maybe we can kind of perfect it down to a science if you want. So the earlier you work on it, the sooner I can help you. Right? If you want to take a stab at it. All right, so to end class today, I just want to prep you for next week. Next week, we're reading we're starting with John Milton's Paradise Lost. All right, so you're going to read a pretty good chunk of it before next class. So you're going to read books 1 and 2, a little bit of 3, and book 4. So you're going to read a pretty good chunk of it for next week. So to give you guys a little bit of context for what it is, Paradise Lost is John Milton's English epic. John Milton said, I'm going to take the epic form that Homer and Dante and everybody else did, and I'm going to write an English epic using our language. So he pretty much goes back and retells the Genesis story. He goes back and retells the story of Adam and Eve and creation. And he goes back and tells the story about the war in heaven between Satan and the angels. Right. This is the next 2 weeks in the class are going to be really heavy grounded with religious themes. But when you're reading Paradise Lost, some stuff to think about. The devil in Paradise Lost is probably the most famous character because Milton arguably makes the devil sympathetic. Right? He kind of makes you feel sympathy for the devil, right? To quote the Rolling Stones song, right? So as you read, I'll be interested to hear what you guys have to say about, do you feel sympathy for the devil the further you go or not? Right? Are you falling victim to the devil's rhetoric, right? About how he's unjustly treated by God and God's a tyrant and all this stuff. So this is definitely going to challenge a lot of like your ideas about this type of stuff. So it'll be a fun discussion because we're not talking about mythological figures anymore, especially if you're religious. Like we're talking about Christianity. We're putting Christianity into an epic format. So the devil will become an epic character, kind of like Achilles, right, where he's very prideful. So, but you're going to get an introduction to the devil. Right? You're going to get God's take. You're going to get God's take on all this. And then you're going to get an introduction to Eden next class. So you're going to read it's going to be a pretty fair amount of stuff that you'll read next week. I did have it divvied up to where you would have a discussion through on Monday and then one late in the week. But I'll just have you guys do one discussion on it late in the week. So if you come to Zoom, of course, you won't have to do that discussion. Right. So what will take the place of the discussion will be the grammar quiz. Right. That I talked about earlier. So that will take the place of your early week discussion next week. It's the grammar quiz. Take that and you'll be good. And if you come to Zoom, you won't have to do the discussion. So, like I said, give yourself plenty of time to read Milton. Milton is the most challenging writer we've read so far, even though he writes natively in English. Right, the guy has a pretty profuse vocabulary. Right, so give yourself time. I would recommend listening to it. It's very cool to listen to. See if you can find an audio book of it if you have trouble reading it. Listen to it. But yeah, just know next week it's going. Sometimes teaching Paradise Lost can be a little touchy, right? Just because it does challenge a lot of stuff we take for granted with the Christian religion. So I'll be interested to hear what you guys. It's an interesting perspective on things. But Milton himself was a very devout Puritan. Right? He was a Calvinist Christian. He was very devout and very devout Protestant who believed in things like predestination, right? God preordains whether we're going to be saved or damned or not, right? So he believed stuff like that. So we'll get real heavy into the weeds of all that stuff next week. Now that's my biggest word of advice. Just give yourself plenty of time. Enjoy it. Most of the time, students love it. Like most of the time when I teach this thing, students get into it just because it's about stuff we know, right? So enjoy it. Take your time with it. And come back ready to talk next week. All right.
So is that going to just be on a link, like the punctuation test or whatever? Is it just going to be like okay? All right.
Yeah. In next week's folder, I'll put it up there where you should be able to see it pretty easy.
Okay.
As far as Paradise Lost goes, I did recommend you guys pick up a paper copy, but if you didn't, I'll show you where the copy is I provided you. Because it's not in the book, unfortunately.
They have a couple more. They have like 2 or 3 more copies at Books A Million, and it was like $10-12.
What store? Charleston?
Yeah, right there by side of Coles at Southridge.
Yeah, if you on our blackboard, you can click readings not in the text, and then I have a full copy of Paradise Lost here. It's a pretty good copy. Like once you scroll down, get to like book 1, get past all the content stuff here. Once you get to book 1, it gives you pretty good descriptions of like the words. We're 40 pages into the PDF before we get to the poem itself. Let's see. book one, so starting on 47 of the PDF. But when you read through the poem, like it'll give you context for like all the different words, or it'll give you context for like the mythology if you're not familiar with the mythology. He makes tons of references to stuff we've already read in this class. So he references the Iliad, the Greeks, and all that stuff. So a page of it will look like this, but this version I gave you will give you lots of notes to help you unpack it all. Okay, so that's why I gave you this edition. If you use some editions that are on the internet, they don't have the notes to go with it. So I do think this is a pretty good edition. But if you have a book from the bookstore, if you have Paradise Lost in a paper copy, it probably has those notes too. So the notes are important for understanding it, I think. So, like I said, just give yourself plenty of time with Milton. Don't rush it. Don't rush it. I will. I'll take a look at it again. I might try to condense a little bit of it down. I'll see what I can come up with. So, yeah, book 1, 2, 3, 4. Just a little bit of 3 though. I don't make everybody read the whole thing in 3. So. I'll post instructions and all that for you. All right. Anything before? Let me get a quick roll count here before we depart. Give me just a second. Make sure I got everybody. Got Leah, got Demi, Desmond, Emily, Penny, Jenna, Kira, Lauren, Cole, Miles, Shanika. All right. I got everybody. Now I got both of you.
Okay.
Good deal.
All right, guys, and take care. Have a good weekend. We'll see y'all next week.
You too.